Hey there, everyone. Welcome to The Great Retention with Camber Parker, sponsored by the YoProKnow. I'm Camber, your young professional expert and founder of the YoProKnow, where we bring you all the answers you need to know about how to recruit and retain young professional talent, starting with the young professionals you work with. There's a lot of young professional fish in the sea, but how do you catch them? And what do you do once you reel them in? That's where we come in. Today, I am thrilled to have Jennifer Floyd join us, president at HR Experts on Demand, and joining us from Greenville, South Carolina. While Jennifer and I only met in the last few months, we have found shared interest, and she has really taken me under her wing as a new businesswoman in this space. And for that, I'm extremely grateful. With an extensive human resources background, I knew she was the right person to have on this show. In the current labor market, we have a lot of questions, and as it pertains to young professionals, I think Jennifer can shed some light on those questions and even give us a few answers in the process. Jennifer, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So we're going to do what I like to call a quick lightning round. Okay. And so can you just give us a little more of a background on yourself, whether it's personal, professional, and then we'll dive into more of the details.
Sure, be glad to. Long-term HR pro, that's mostly the business language that I speak. Have been in HR for longer than I'd like to admit, but I made it my career when I kind of fell into it. Mm-hmm. I graduated with a marketing background and ended up in HR. So have been there ever since. And have been a business owner for almost 5 years now. Next month is my 5-year anniversary. And thank you. I'm excited about that. Decided to take the leap when my last company decided to sell. Mm-hmm. And I thought, do I really want to go through the process again of finding a new job, is this the time to take the risk? And it was it. So I was excited to do it by myself. Doing it 5 years now and loving every second of it.
Great. Well, thank you for giving us that background.
Yeah, thank you.
Can you share an experience that you've had working with young professionals? So for those in the audience that might not know exactly what that means, by definition, a young professional is anyone 21 to 39 years old. So can you share an experience that you've had and tell us what that experience was like? And it might be more of a plural young professionals that you've worked with, but share a little bit more about that with us.
Sure. So I'll give you two. Okay. The first one is an experience that I've had working with someone who worked on a part-time basis with me over the past couple of years, who is a young professional. Typically in consulting, you won't find a lot of earlier in career people because your clients don't want to pay for them to learn on the job. They want somebody to come in and know what they're doing. But in this particular situation, they were handling some pretty baseline kind of HR projects. And they taught me very quickly that I need to kind of get up to speed on some of the things that I don't keep up with very well. And, it's cliche, but it's technology. Mm-hmm. I thought I was pretty savvy, but there's always more to learn. So that was a wonderful experience. Mm-hmm. And I think that we were able to invest in each other that way. Mm-hmm. I will tell you, the second one is a little bit more embarrassing. I went to a company and taught a sexual harassment class. Mm-hmm. And what I learned talking with these younger people that were in this session was that all of the examples that I provided to them were before their time of being born. So I used some examples from pop culture. So embarrassing, but they were very old examples that really exemplified and illustrated the sexual harassment kind of environment very well, but it just landed differently with a group that didn't know.
Like went over their heads.
Yeah. And, one of the examples was Cindy Crawford being the spokesperson for Pepsi Cola. And that they were not around when she was the spokesperson for Pepsi. So embarrassing for me, but it was a great eye opener that I got to stay with the trends.
Yeah, so, good learning experience. Absolutely. Just naturally as generations come and go and grow into the workforce, just adapting to that, I think is important.
That's right.
Well, today, one of the big topics we're talking about, of course, is the Great Resignation, or people are calling it the Great Reshuffling, of course. And so as an HR professional, what can you tell us about these terms and what your experience has been with them, with your clients?
Sure. So it's a very difficult time for employers, for all employers, no matter what industry. Finding talent is the top item, I think, for every client that I work with today. How are we going to find the people we need? We have these openings and we can't find anybody. So I'm not a recruiter. I'm an HR consultant, kind of on the technical end of HR. But I have tried to help as much as I can in trying to find at least local talent. And it's very difficult. So I think all of my clients are seeing, no matter their industry, no matter the position, we all see it as consumers, that companies are just struggling with staff. And that continues to be the number one thing that I work with or that I hear. I don't go out and recruit, but I hear my clients struggling. So because they can't hire people, how are we trying to use our internal talent to do other things to try to fill in those gaps?
Absolutely. Well, can you tell us, just because we haven't talked too much about your business, can you tell us a little bit more about what kinds of things you're doing, working with clients, just so people in the audience have a better understanding?
Sure. Yeah. So we are a full service HR consulting firm. When I say full service, it's really not full service. Under the umbrella of technical HR consulting, we can handle pretty much anything. We don't run payroll. We're not an insurance broker. And again, like I said, I don't really specialize in recruiting, but everything else. So that falls under that umbrella is something that we could support companies with. So compliance, employee relations, leadership and executive development, various kinds of, I'm working with a client right now on their org chart structure, some things that you maybe traditionally don't think of as an HR kind of skill, but certainly things that HR people have been involved in the business is something that we can help with. And what I found is a lot of small businesses, at least here in the upstate, and I would say otherwise, are those under 100 employees. If they have someone in HR, smaller organizations than that, less than 50 employees typically don't. But if they do, that person is usually taxed to their capacity of just trying to get the stuff done. But being able to rely on someone like us to be able to come in and work on projects, do an audit to see where they maybe need to do things differently or things that have been missed. All of that is where we really specialize.
Great. Thank you. And in those meetings and with your clients, what are you seeing when you work with people who have dealt with different experiences with young professionals? What types of things are you hearing from those clients about working with these young professionals?
Again, most of my clients are the small to mid-sized businesses. And I would even say small is the majority of the clients that I work with. And they are not necessarily on the leading edge of what's going on in the community. They or even in the local workforce. They're not really looking at flexible work environments or different kinds of benefits they can offer. And those sometimes are kind of the fancy way of attracting people that they feel like is more attuned to a larger organization. They find that to be somewhat distracting to their business model and getting the work done. Especially in a small business, you wear 5 or 6 hats. You probably need to be in the office to do that and to be agile internally to be able to handle those things. So when you talk to them about, well, younger professionals are looking for more flexibility, the ability to know what their next step in the organization is going to be. They want clarity around that, and so on. Some of the smaller clients that I work with get frustrated by that and say, well, it's a paying job. We're a really great company. We take care of our employees. Isn't that enough? So that's where I find the rub sometimes with our smaller clients.
Yeah, I can imagine that. And when you and I met a couple months ago, we had talked about the different generations in the workforce right now. So what trends are you seeing? Again, kind of a good segue from the last question. What trends are you seeing as far as which generations work best together? And what are some of those best practices? And then second part to the question is, what are some areas for concern when the different generations are working together?
I guess we do still talk about boomers in the workplace. I believe COVID really pushed a lot of them into retirement, to taking retirement early if they were able to. So I've seen less boomers in the environments that I work in. It's really the Gen Xers like me who are the old folks now. It's just the example that I gave when I had a younger professional working with me. I don't know what I don't know about how to be better in the things that I already do. I've already got my systems, my ways, my processes. But a younger professional that can come in and show some efficiencies and how technology can help is really helpful. But the Gen Xers sometimes are not always open to hearing that. There might be some, well, back in my day, this is how we did it, and you need to earn your stripes the same way I did. So that's some of the rub that I see. The second question was, what are some of the ways that we've seen them work together?
Yes.
In a successful way. One client in particular really took the dual investment kind of approach. If Gen Xers can invest in our younger professionals and teach them things, help them think about things in a different way, different angles, and become better business people through their experience, how can we reverse that investment and help our Gen Xers and sometimes boomers learn as well? And I think when you are clear and transparent about that is our expectation, that is our objective here, there's a little bit more buy-in, I think, rather than just saying, listen, everybody's got to get along, just figure it out. How about we say, we really need our younger professionals to teach us some efficiencies or how to use technology in a different way and teach us this language that we may not know very well. And if we can be transparent about that objective, I think people are more accepting.
I think so too. I mean, clear is kind and clear expectations are very important. So having that up front for these employees when they come in or when new hires are brought in, so the other employees can understand what's going on, I think is really important.
Yeah.
I think there are just so many misconceptions out there right now about other generations, right? So Gen Xers might think one way about millennials and the rising Gen Z generation. And something that I try to do really hard with the Yo Pro No is be that bridge between these generations. I don't want people and companies that I'm working with to think, well, you're just coming in and trying to tell us what we need to do to make the young professionals happy. On the flip side of what you said, yes, we need to be understanding of young professionals, but young professionals need to be understanding about the other generations, what I like to call the experienced professionals, because you have been here. You've been here longer than we have, and you know the ropes and you know a thing or two. So I think that's another side to your point is making sure that all generations just respect each other, number one thing, but also have an understanding of why you do the things that you do because of your experiences that you've had up to this point.
Yeah. Yeah. And for the younger professionals to remember, and this is, probably a little bit of a defensive position to be in for my generation, but we're the ones that had to learn how to do things the hard way. We had our cassette boombox,
right?
And we had to remember how to record after the DJ stopped talking and when in the beginning of the song and make our own mixtapes. Right. And so there's some ingenuity that comes out of that kind of
very
thinking.
Much so.
So that could be appreciated, even though it might be a little older, but yeah.
Well, one of the main behavioral traits of Gen Xers are resourceful. So I'd say that hits the nail on the head there.
That's exactly right.
But I really believe that we could have a whole conversation about generations. But in the interest of time for this episode, how can businesses work with their young professionals to better recruit and retain them? So I know that's a loaded question, so we can divide that into two parts again. But what can they be doing better?
I think organizations need to involve young professionals in the recruitment and the retention plans. A good while ago when I worked for another organization, we found on-campus recruiting was very important to our growth plans because of the specificity of our business. And in the area, we didn't have a lot of competitors. So anytime we hired somebody, we were finding ourselves relocating a lot of people. And so we decided, well, let's go to the schools and find people straight out of school that are local or close to local, and bring them in that way and groom them and grow them internally, which was a great plan. But we figured out a couple years into that process that we needed them to be involved in the recruitment of their peers, and we needed them to be involved within the company to tell us how do we best retain their generation in the way that spoke to them. And I think the balance is listening and involving everyone from different aspects, but also understanding that the business model comes first. And so how can we enhance the way we do business by also speaking to the different generations and the needs of those folks in the workplace, but not letting that become more important than the business model.
I like that point. I think a lot of times people at companies make decisions because they're in leadership and they just think that it's because they're assuming what young professionals actually want. But including them in the process makes things a lot easier for the companies because you're just asking them instead of doing something that you think is what they want. And then in reality, it really isn't.
Exactly.
I love that point.
Yeah. And we figured out when, you go to a college campus to recruit, college kids are going to be really interested in looking and seeing companies that have their peers represented to them. So it was seems like a no-brainer, but it was something that we kind of had to figure out after a couple years, and it was successful.
Yeah, well, I think that was a really outside of the box way of thinking, which you might think it sounds so simple because I also think it's, why wouldn't you do that? But a lot of companies just aren't thinking that way because they're stuck in the ways that they've always done things. And so it's important to think outside of the box like that. So kudos to you and your team at the time. So wrapping things up in the interest of time, what do you think, as this growing number of Gen Zers and millennials are entering the workforce and soon Gen Alpha, with the baby boomers and some Gen Xers starting to retire over the next several years, where do you see the biggest challenge?
I think the biggest challenge, Camber, is internal collaboration that is open and respectful and allows everyone to have a voice. And then ensuring that senior leadership of organizations is open to hearing from other people within the company. And what I mean by that is things that might seem radical or different, not poo-pooing those right away, but maybe creating focus groups within your staff, within your organization that is made up of many different generational groups, to think about what serves our business well first, and then what serves our employees and clients who do business with us, so that the business can really shine through everyone's eyes. It's not just something that just a certain group of clients or a certain group of employees feel good about, but how can everybody be included? We've got a lot of DEI, DE&I efforts that are taking hold over the past few years, which is great. And people typically think of that means different races are being included in different things, but it's very much about age as well, as we see so many generations in the workplace. And I think that's something that I would say really over the past 4 or 5 years has become more acceptable nomenclature and practices within the organization. It just seems to be more normal now, which is fantastic.
I think so too. And age is absolutely a part of that DE&I puzzle that a lot of people don't think of. So thank you for bringing that up. I think it's really important. One other thing that I want to cover before we leave, because I think it's really important, is this perception of HR, right, that people have. And you can speak to that a little bit. But when I think of HR, sometimes I think of conflict because usually you're the ones who are managing it and you're on the other end of that. But what have you seen, particularly as a result of the pandemic? So we're in this post-pandemic workplace. What are you seeing from a conflict resolution side? And is it, whether it's positive or negative, I'd love to just know your angle on that.
So conflict resolution since the pandemic. So, the challenge that is so much more of it is virtual now. If I'm an employee and I don't get along with my manager or I have a problem with a teammate, we're not in the same room often. And so now you've got the added complexity of communicating via Zoom or Teams and not knowing the body language or the tone exactly the way it would be face to face. So I think communication is more strained now than it has been, particularly when you've got someone who doesn't get on camera or, doesn't want to engage as much as they can, even though they're virtual. That can kind of add to it. The HR perspective of that is you can't communicate enough. It's just communicate. And HR, it can represent something, sometimes scary or negative. in some people's minds. That's kind of, unfortunately, some of the reputation HR has. But I think the real benefit of having a good HR support is the fact that you've got an advocate on the employee side and a support and partnership with leadership as well. And so bringing those two together, despite being in the office 2 days or 3 days a week or whatever, HR brings a great bridge to try to figure those puzzles out. And the HR leaders that are in the world now are learning, the younger folks in HR are learning how to address those issues along with the businesses. So, in 10 years, this will be a normal thing for our HR folks to probably master in some sort of certification at that point.
But you really are the pioneers in a sense for this specific issue because it was new to everybody, right? Unprecedented times. So
Absolutely.
It's a buzzword.
My HR friends were very tired during the pandemic.
Yes, I can imagine. Well, any other last minute words of advice to the businesses that might be listening or watching this today that we haven't covered yet?
No, I don't think so. I think you've covered it really well. The communication
covered it.
The communication has been, is just something that I've always worked on when I've worked within businesses is how do we open that communication up? It's so much harder now. Even though our technologically advanced tools have brought us ways to communicate with each other, we all know when it's screen to screen, it's just harder.
Yeah.
So if there's any advice I can give to business leaders, it's find a way to pull together your people and really, really pay attention to your culture and spend time developing that culture despite the challenges you have in how the workforce is put together. Really spend time on that. And one tip I'll give to the leaders, the senior leaders of organizations out there. I worked in an organization one time where I was the senior HR executive, and when I went to our senior staff meetings, it was my job to bring the culture item of the week to that table. Now, that doesn't mean I was the only person responsible for culture, but it was my job to keep it in the forefront for everyone. So I made sure that every staff meeting agenda had the item of culture on there so that we didn't lose sight of that. And that it just really helped keep it in front of us.
Cool. Yeah. Well, that's a really cool tangible tip that people can take with them when they're listening to this and apply it tomorrow. So I love that. Yeah. And before we go, I do want to put a little plug in for GSHRM since you're the president this year. And GSHRM stands for Greenville Society of Human Resource Management.
Correct.
All right.
Very good.
I got it. So I just joined. And I think that that's a really excellent resource. I mean, yes, it is for HR professionals. I'm technically not an HR professional. And so I've joined, and I just feel like the education you provide is really important. And it is great to see that all of the HR professionals are banding together. And, it's what's happening right now in the labor market really is unprecedented.
It is.
And it's really important. So I just wanted to put a plug in there if you want to share anything else about that.
I do. Yeah, we are. We were born out of the HR professionals in the group, but GSHRM has really evolved over the years, and we have a lot to offer just people managers. So even if you're not in the HR world, being a people manager, you all have the same kind of complexies. And how do I reach people? How do I communicate with them? We spend a lot of time with our people leaders in the market as well, and nearly 500 members. Just in the Greenville community. So that's not upstate, that's Greenville. So we've got a lot of talent and knowledge in our group, and we love to share it. So invite everybody to join.
Yeah, well, if you're in Greenville and you are a people manager or an HR, you'll have to join. Yeah. But Jennifer, thank you so much for being on today's show. We took away so much in just a short period of time. So happy to have you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate being here.
All right. Thank you all again for joining us on The Great Retention with Camber Parker. Before you go, remember this. Young professionals make up nearly half of the workforce today and are expected to jump at a rapid rate in this decade. What will you do as business leaders to help them become the next great leaders we need for the future? Join us next time for more information on how to recruit and retain young professionals. And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts. This helps us know where to find other episodes about this topic in the audience. And don't forget to share with your coworkers, most importantly. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.